There's probably no better sporting example of human strength, perseverance, and tenacity than the marathon. And the most celebrated of this 26-mile distance running competition outside of the Olympic Games is the Boston Marathon that takes place every year in April. Though the first Boston Marathon was in 1897, it wasn't until 1972 that women were allowed to compete. For centuries, many sports were deemed inappropriate for women because it was believed that women were too frail and that for a woman to compete in rigorous competition, it was outright immoral. Science was also used to back up these ridiculous claims. In 1898, a doctor from Berlin named Gerson wrote in the German Journal of Physical Education that violent movements of the body can cause a shift in the position and a loosening of the uterus, as well as prolapse and bleeding, with resulting sterility, thus defeating a woman's true purpose in life, i.e., the bringing forth of strong children. So in other words, not only did they believe women were incapable of competing in an event like the marathon, but if she tried, her uterus would fall out. Over the years, much has been made about the story of KV Switzer, who in 1967 became the first woman to register and compete in the Boston Marathon. But she actually wasn't the first woman to run the race. That came a year earlier in 1966, when 23-year-old running enthusiast Roberta "Bobbi" Gibb made the brave decision to make history. Inspired from watching the marathon in 1964 with her dad, she decided she wanted to enter the race. She started training the very next day and wrote a letter to the Boston Athletic Association asking if she could be allowed to compete. The race director at the time, Will Cloney, wrote back saying that women physiologically were incapable of running the 26-mile event and were too much of a medical liability. He said the marathon is a men's division race and women are not able to compete in events more than 1.5 miles. Now at this point, Gibb is running up to 40 miles in her training session, so she's thinking, only 1.5 miles? So now she's caught in this weird catch-22 situation. She knows she's fit enough to do it and has to do it to prove that she can do it, but she can't do it because it's believed that it's impossible for her to do it. That's when she made the bold decision to compete anyway and debunk this ridiculous myth. Despite her fears of being arrested and thrown in jail, on April 19th, 1966, the day of the Boston Marathon, Gibb prepared to do the unthinkable. She put on a pair of her brother's Bermuda shorts, a black bathing suit top, and a blue hoodie she had pulled over her head and hid in the bushes near the start line of the race. When the gun went, she waited until about half the competitors had passed before jumping in the race. A few minutes go by, and then some of the men start to notice that, hey, I think that's a woman. Now, kudos to these guys, because they could have called her out, they could have pushed her out of the race, but they did none of that. They supported her with words of encouragement, saying things like, I wish my wife or my girlfriend would run also. And when Gibb expressed how scared she was to take off the hoodie and be found out by the officials and maybe even get kicked out of the race, they assured her that no such thing would happen because they had her back. News spread about a woman being in the race and the media got behind the story. She finished the race in a time of 3 hours, 21 minutes, 40 seconds, ahead of over 2/3 of the male competition. With Gibb's successful completion of this race, and with Katherine Switzer a year later successfully entering the race under the name KV Switzer before being tackled by a race official who found out she was a woman during the race. At this point, the campaign for women's equality in the marathon was in full swing. It would take another 5 years before women officially were allowed to compete in the Boston Marathon. Although women's sport has come a long way over the past century, there's still so much progress to be made. Whether it's equal pay or the sexualization of female athletes or even maternity rights for elite competitors who choose to go through pregnancy, the journey to equality continues. In 2019, of the more than 30,000 competitors in the Boston Marathon, 45%, nearly half, were women. So with the bold actions of women like Bobbi Gibb, who in the face of fear decided to do what was seen as impossible, and all the male allies that supported her along that journey, show us is that, like Marianne Williamson so eloquently put it, as we are liberated from our own fear, our presence, automatically liberates others. Thanks for watching Color Commentary. Interested in the way sport and social change intersect? Why not subscribe to this channel and follow me at Wendy-Ann Runs on Twitter and Instagram.